if you have your health, you have everything. But when you have your thoughts about you at 94, you're doing pretty good. And you can, I think, rest easily that you had a good life. It's coming up on 15 and a half before 8 at News Radio 570 WKBN. How much of that has to do with genetics? How much of it has to do with health care in America and the availability of health care? We're going to find out what's happening with some companies. You just read recently that Target is going to eliminate the insurance benefits for their part-time workers and make them go into Obamacare, make them switch over to the Affordable Care Act. Now, they are not the only company and probably will not be the last company that does this because the employees themselves will probably get better insurance by being off the plan, and hopefully this is something that's going to ease up some money for the corporations. They always talk about not having enough money and not knowing what the future is going to hold and whether or not they're going to have the finances in the future to pay employees and pay their health care. Well, maybe if they don't have to, maybe if they're getting, their employers are getting their benefits from the federal government, maybe that will free up some money for the corporations to hire more people. We'll wait and see because we have a guest coming up on that. He's an HR consultant. His name is Bazell, and we'll see whether or not this is a trend that companies dumping their employee insurance for Obamacare and whether that will continue and what the impact will be on the rest of society. The president is going to deliver his State of the Union address tonight. Will you be watching? It's interesting. One of the things that's leaking out, one of the portions of the State of the Union that is leaking out is that he plans to tell Congress he's taking executive action to raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour for some federal contract workers. That will be interesting. If he can do that, does that mean that private employers will follow along and increase the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour? It's higher than $7.25 in some states, and many workers, even at the lower end of the economic ladder, are making better than $7.25 an hour. But the president believes that $10.10 an hour will be very beneficial. But what about these health care coverages, the health insurance that you get from your employer, especially if you work for one of the big retailers? We understand that Target is just the latest that has announced it will be cutting health insurance for its part-time workers. HR consultant Paul Bazell joins us on News Radio 570 WKBN. Good morning, Mr. Bazell.
Good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, we appreciate you coming on to talk about this. So Target has dropped its insurance for part-time workers, telling the employees and giving them about $500, I understand, to go get coverage under the Affordable Care Act.
All true. This is a trend that started last year and will continue into the foreseeable future unless the law changes again.
And what impact is that going to have? Will it have on employers, private employers?
Well, like most healthcare discussions, the answer is it depends on each individual employer and employee situation as to whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing. In the report that is cited, one of the execs from Target says that this is going to be a good thing for their employees, generally speaking, because they can get better and lower cost health insurance through the insurance exchanges than the company was able to get for them collectively. And I'm sure in some cases that will actually be true, and in other situations, nothing will be farther from the truth.
Mm-hmm. As far as the cost of the insurance?
Cost of the insurance and the benefits themselves, because people are going to buy what they can afford, right?
Sure. And Target has, a lot of employees. I don't know how many thousands they employ nationwide, but isn't that part of the Affordable Care Act? If you're an employer of over so many employees, there's a certain amount that you have to kick into this?
There is an amount of insurance that you have to provide, and the insurance companies themselves, if an employer is going to sponsor an insured plan, there is an amount that employers are expected to kick in. So yes, there is that cost factor.
So if they
decision process.
Yeah, if they decide that they're going to eliminate insurance for their part-time workers and push them into the Affordable Care Act, they're going to have to pay some kind of penalty to help those employees pay for their coverage.
They don't have to under the law. this is purely voluntary. So what Target is doing is a purely voluntary move by offering to help their part-time employees buy their own insurance. And the law, unfortunately, does not really give employers or employees a whole lot of help in that regard because there is no favorable tax treatment for that additional money an employer is paying.
And as far as the coverage is concerned, when this was all being debated before it became law, we understood that a number of insurance policies that especially big box retailers were offering to their employees weren't worth all that much as far as hospital care is and what was being covered for the deductibles that they were having to pay.
All true. Many of the big box stores, the retailers, etc., were providing minimal health care benefits to their part-time workers, and that was a way that they figured their way to affording any health care coverage for that workforce at all. So it was not necessarily the best choice, but it was a choice those businesses felt they could afford.
Mm-hmm. And going forward, if the employers like Target and Trader Joe's and some others out there, if they're getting rid of the insurance policies for their part-time workers, would that free up extra money, perhaps, for them to do more hiring?
Well, an observer would say, yes, obviously it will, but if the employers have not attended to other aspects of the law, like calculating minimum hours of what they're calling a part-time worker, it could actually work in reverse, and they could end up spending more money. We've had client scenarios here in our business where it's actually worked against them financially to discontinue offering insurance. That's hard to believe, but it's the truth.
Interesting, because we've heard up to this point a lot of criticism about the Affordable Care Act, but the responsibility of the private companies comes into play in these scenarios, and that could increase as to whether or not these companies are managing their employees well, correct?
All true. Any healthcare discussion, any aspect of healthcare seems to evolve right around to the fact that each scenario for each employer and each employee is different, and it changes over time. So it's like hitting a moving target, and what works favorably for one employer or contingent of people ends up being completely negative for the next scenario. It's really quite amazing to see, quite dynamic, and it's why anytime you bring up the subject, people get all stressed out.
Sure. Mr. Bazell, as an HR consultant, you've obviously worked with corporations and management teams in trying to figure out health care benefit packages for the employees. If you had a crystal ball, what would you say the future is on these?
Oh, now you're really asking the tough questions. Ultimately, we foresee employer-sponsored healthcare benefits going the way of the defined benefit pension plan, that it will no longer be, at some point in the future, a popular option for employers to be offering these benefits. The costs are getting too high, and the liability and rules associated with offering health insurance are becoming far too burdensome. And that is exactly what happened with the defined benefit pension plan. And if you're asking me about what I predict for the future, I predict so will go health insurance as we know it today.
And the Affordable Care Act, as we know it today, unless there's some tweaking that goes on in the future, it may turn into a single-payer plan.
Well, some folks would believe that is what the government's intention is all along here.
Interesting. All right. We're just on the sidelines watching it all happen. We thank you for being with us, Paul.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. HR consultant Paul Bazell.